Usually when we talk about building a life of faith, there's this expectation of, well, solid engineering.
Right, like you're following a blueprint.
Exactly. You study the blueprints, you pour the concrete foundation of your beliefs, you align your theology perfectly with, everything you've been taught.
Making sure every single doctrine supports the other one.
Yeah, and you look at it and say, okay, my house is built, it is structurally sound, I am safe.
It's incredibly comforting. I mean,
Yeah.
we like our belief systems to be categorized, right?
Yeah.
Visible, and above all, sturdy.
Oh, for sure.
You look at the weather forecast of life, and you think you've accounted for every possible storm.
The walls are thick, the roof is sealed, but then you step into the world of profound, agonizing loss,
Yeah.
into the raw, just unfiltered reality of grief. And suddenly that solid ground just turns to liquid.
The earthquake hit.
The earthquake hits, and the walls come crashing down on top of you. And you realize, looking around in the dust, coughing and bleeding, that you weren't living in a fortress at all.
Not even close.
The entire structure collapses, and you are left completely exposed to the elements. And that exact collapse is what happened to one of the greatest Christian minds of the 20th century.
It really is.
Today, we are bringing you a deep dive into the private, agonizing journal of C.S. Lewis.
He published it under a pseudonym originally, right?
Yeah, he called it A Grief Observed. And he wrote it after the tragic, devastating death of his wife, Joy David Wimman.
Who he refers to in the text simply as H.
Right, just H. And it's a breathtaking piece of literature.
Precisely because of how exposed it is. I mean, set the context for you today. It is vital to understand what this book is not.
Yeah, tell us what it isn't.
Well, Lewis wasn't writing a neat theological treatise here. He wasn't, sitting in his comfortable Oxford office trying to construct a clean philosophical defense of why bad things happen to good people.
Which he had done before.
He had. But this wasn't that. He was recording a real-time, messy, terrifying crisis of faith. This isn't abstract theology.
What is it then?
It is phenomenology. It is the lived, breathing, bleeding experience of grief under the sovereignty of God.
Wow.
He is literally writing this in the dark hours of the night when the silence of the house is just deafening.
And that leads us to the core question we want to explore for you today. The mission for this deep dive.
The big question.
How does this agonizingly honest book, a book that is essentially about feeling completely abandoned by God, actually inspire Christians to love Christ more deeply?
Right, and live for him more fully in their daily lives.
Because reading it, you don't immediately feel inspired.
No, not at all.
You feel the absolute terror of his situation. He upends how we usually categorize sorrow right from the very first page.
Yeah, that famous opening line.
He writes, "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear."
It's startling.
He explicitly says he's not afraid, but the physical sensation is exactly like being afraid. The fluttering in the stomach, the restlessness.
The yawning, the constant swallowing.
Yes, that physical shock is it's so visceral.
And it's the absolute necessary starting point for understanding grief. What's fascinating here is how grief alters human perception on a biological level.
A biological level, like physically changing us.
Exactly. God created humans as integrated beings. We are not just floating ethereal minds trapped in meat suits.
Right.
We are flesh and soul inextricably intertwined. Therefore, spiritual mourning naturally, inevitably, manifests physically.
It's a full-body trauma.
It is.
Yeah.
Lewis talks about this invisible blanket between him and the world.
Yeah, he describes finding it hard to take in what anyone says or hard to even want to take it in.
Yeah.
He calls it the laziness of grief.
The laziness of grief, such a brilliant phrase.
He says that except at his job, where the machine just sort of runs on habit, he loathes the slightest effort.
Not just big efforts, right?
No. Not just the effort of writing or thinking deeply, but reading a simple letter, even shaving.
Wow.
Yes, what does it matter now whether my cheek is rough or smooth? It's this total collapse of motivation for the mundane.
There is a brilliant observation made by the French philosopher Blaise Pascal that perfectly contrasts with Lewis's experience here.
Oh, what did Pascal say?
Well, Pascal talked about how an unhappy man usually wants distractions. He gave the example of a man who lost his son seeking distraction by throwing himself into hunting a boar.
Okay, so keeping busy to forget.
Right. The physical exertion numbs the mental pain, but Lewis explicitly counters that idea in his journal.
What does he say?
He says an unhappy man wants a distraction only in the way a dog-tired man wants an extra blanket on a cold night.
Oh, yeah.
meaning he'd rather lie there shivering than exert the energy to get up and find one.
That image is so heavy. The paralysis is absolute. You'd literally rather freeze than move.
Exactly.
But what's terrifying is that this physical and emotional paralysis quickly triggers a theological paralysis for Lewis.
The collapse of the house.
Yes. This is where he makes the realization that his previous faith, that perfectly engineered house we talked about at the start, was actually what he calls a house of cards.
Which is an astonishing admission from the man who literally wrote the book, The Problem of Pain.
Exactly. I mean, he thought he had taken suffering into account. He was C.S. Lewis.
The great apologist.
He had debated the atheists, he had given the radio broadcasts, he had reasoned out why God allows pain.
He had it all figured out on paper.
But when his wife actually dies, he realizes that all of that was just, in his words, an imaginary faith playing with innocuous counters.
He hits the stark wall between intellectual assent and existential faith.
Theory versus reality.
Yes. Lewis notes something incredibly profound about human nature here. He says you never know how much you really believe anything until its truth or falsehood becomes a matter of life and death to you.
You know, the way you're explaining that reminds me of an analogy.
Let's hear it.
It's like thinking you're an expert sailor because you've read a massive stack of books about the ocean.
Okay, sure.
You've studied the physics of wind, you know the names of all the knots, you can diagram a sailboat perfectly on a chalkboard.
You're an expert in the classroom.
Right. But then suddenly, you're dropped into the middle of a Category 5 hurricane in the dead of night.
Yeah. And the books don't help.
Your book knowledge doesn't keep you warm when the freezing water is hitting your face.
That is a perfect parallel. And, Lewis himself uses the analogy of a rope.
A rope? How so?
He says it's incredibly easy to say you believe a rope is strong and sound as long as you are merely using it to cord a box for shipping.
Oh, sure. Low stakes.
Right. You trust it completely for that minor task. But suppose you had to hang by that exact same rope over a terrifying precipice.
Oh, wow.
Wouldn't you then, for the very first time, discover how much you really trusted it?
I mean, you'd question every single fiber of that rope.
Absolutely.
But let me challenge that a bit for you, the listener, because when the hurricane hits your Tuesday morning, when you get the medical diagnosis, or that phone call that changes everything, does the suffering actually create that weakness in your faith? Or is it doing something else?
It's a crucial distinction. Suffering acts as a spiritual diagnostic tool.
Diagnostic. Okay.
Yeah. It does not create the weakness. It exposes the vacuity that was already there.
So the house of cards was always a house of cards.
As Lewis points out, if his house collapsed at one blow, that is because it was house of cards all along. The faith which merely took these things into account was not true faith, but imagination.
It was untested theory.
Exactly.
So for anyone listening who is sitting in the rubble right now, what does that diagnostic tool actually tell them? Does it mean they were never really Christians?
No, not at all. It tells you that doctrinal correctness does not equal emotional preparedness.
That's a good way to put it.
You can have your theology perfectly aligned, but until it is tested in the crucible of real loss, it remains theoretical.
So we shouldn't be surprised.
We shouldn't be surprised or ashamed when a tragedy makes our faith feel frail. The frailty was always there. God is just using the storm to show us where the true, indestructible foundation actually needs to be poured.
But realizing your foundation is weak doesn't instantly make you feel better.
No, it feels awful.
In fact, when this house of cards collapses, the immediate feeling Lewis has isn't some holy enlightenment or peaceful surrender.
Definitely not.
It's not a beautiful moment of clarity where he says, I understand now.
Far from it. The immediate sensation is total, unmitigated abandonment.
Which brings us to one of the most chilling parts of the journal.
Yeah.
The psychological terror he experiences.
It is terrifying.
He talks about going to God when things are happy, when you feel strong, when you don't even really feel you need him.
And God feels close then.
Right. And in those moments, God feels so welcoming. Open arms. But then, Lewis says, go to him when your need is desperate. Go to him when all other help is vain. And what do you find?
A bolted door.
He writes, a door slammed in your face and a sound of bolting and double bolting on the inside. After that, silence.
It is perhaps the most jarring, famous metaphor in the entire text.
A bolted door.
He asks, where is God? You look up at the windows of heaven and they are dark. It's an empty house.
It's so bleak.
He is wrestling with why God seems to be such a present commander in times of prosperity and so very absent a help in times of trouble.
It's terrifying. He even says that the conclusion he dreads most is not, well, So there's no God after all.
Right, atheism would be easier.
That would actually be a relief.
Yeah.
The conclusion he dreads is, so this is what God's really like. Deceive yourself no longer.
And this is where we have to deeply engage with the biblical tradition of lament.
Lament. Oh,
Because when Lewis writes this, he is not stepping outside of Christian orthodoxy into heresy. He is stepping right into the very center of it.
how so?
Well, the repeated question, where is God, or why, is structurally identical to the cries we see in the Psalms in the book of Job.
Right, like Psalm 22. Lewis explicitly links his feelings of the bolted door to Christ on the cross, quoting, "Why hast thou forsaken me?"
Exactly. In the biblical text, that cry is encapsulated in the Greek word hinati.
Hinati.
Yes, meaning for what reason or why. In the Psalms of Lament, think of Psalm 13, Psalm 22, Psalm 88. This cry is not a sign of unbelief.
It's that.
No, it is a sign of covenantal protest. The biblical authors and Lewis are experiencing the agonizing tension between ontological presence and phenomenological absence.
Oh, wait, hold on. You're throwing some heavy theological and philosophical terms at me right out of the gate.
Fair enough, let's break it down.
Ontological presence versus phenomenological absence. Explain that to someone who is just sitting in their living room right now, staring at an empty chair, feeling completely alone. Why does that distinction matter to them?
That's a very fair pause. Let's break it down. Ontological presence simply means the objective reality that God is there.
The fact of it.
It is the fact of his existence and his promise never to leave us. Ontologically, he is present.
Okay, got it. And phenomenological.
Phenomenological absence means how we perceive or experience things. So phenomenologically, God feels a million miles away.
You can't hear him, see him, or feel him.
Right. The tension is knowing in your head that God is in the room, but feeling in your gut that he has completely abandoned you.
That cognitive dissonance is just brutal.
Yeah. It is. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 45, the prophet says, "Truly, you are a God who hides yourself."
God hides himself.
The Greek word used in the ancient translation of that text is apokrypto, which means to conceal or hide.
Apocrypto. Like cryptic.
Exactly. But here is the key. God's concealment does not negate his covenantal purposes. He can be actively walking while remaining completely hidden from our senses.
But the feeling of that concealment is pure agony. Lewis writes about this tension. A friend tries to comfort him by reminding him that even Christ on the cross said, "Why hast thou forsaken me?"
And Lewis doesn't take that well, does he?
Not at all. He snaps back in his journal, I know. Does that make it easier to understand?
And if we look at the original language of the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27, when Christ cries out, the word used for forsaken or abandoned is ekatalepo.
Ekatalepo.
What's crucial about that specific word is its verbal aspect in the Greek. It's in the aorist tense.
Again, ELI 5 for me. Explain like I'm 5. Why does the tense of a Greek verb matter to Lewis's grief?
Because the aorist tense emphasizes the subjective completeness of an action.
Meaning what, exactly?
It means Christ didn't just feel a little distant from the Father. He experienced total, absolute, completed forsakenness.
The abandonment was entire.
Yes. But look at the paradox of that cry. Jesus says, "My God, my God."
My God.
Even while experiencing this total abandonment, Christ and Lewis, in his own way, maintains covenantal address.
He doesn't scream out into the void, "Oh, distant cosmic force."
Exactly. He says, "My God, the relationship, the anchor is still there, even when the feeling is completely gone."
But let me push back on this, because I think a lot of listeners would have a really hard time accepting this logic.
Push away.
If God is supposedly the Father of mercies, the ultimate comforter, why does he allow this specific bolted door silence? Why not just throw the door wide open when your child is bleeding on the porch?
Yeah.
Isn't ignoring a desperate, grieving person just, isn't that just cruelty?
It feels like cruelty. It absolutely does. But God's silence in these moments is not punitive. It is often a necessary destruction.
A necessary destruction.
God is silent to stop us from worshiping a false version of him. Lewis realizes something profound about his own panic. He realizes that his frantic, desperate cries for help might be exactly what is deafening him to God's voice.
Oh.
He writes, "The time when there is nothing at all in your soul except a cry for help may be just the time when God can't give it. You are like the drowning man who can't be helped because he clutches and grabs."
Oh, man. That drowning man analogy is incredibly vivid.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Because anyone who knows water rescue knows that a drowning man in a blind panic will literally pull his rescuer under the water with him.
They'll both drown.
The rescuer sometimes has to wait, treading water just out of reach or approach from behind until the frantic, chaotic grabbing stops.
Precisely. The rescuer's hesitation isn't cruelty. It's the only way to actually save the person.
That makes so much sense.
But before Lewis gets to that place of understanding, his mind goes to some incredibly dark places. When the door is bolted, your imagination runs wild with what is happening on the other side.
Right. The house of cards hasn't just fallen. The rubble is now starting to look sinister.
Very sinister.
Which brings us to the terrifying concepts he wrestles with. The cosmic sadist and the great iconoclast.
This is arguably the most dangerous pivot in the entire journal. He is testing the absolute limits of theodicy.
Theodicy being the vindication of God's goodness in the face of evil.
Right. How can God be good when things are so bad?
Lewis writes that he feels like he is under the harrow and can't escape. He looks at the reality of human consciousness, of people like his wife who had this massive, vibrant capacity for joy and intellect.
And then to have it slowly, agonizingly snatched away by bone cancer.
Exactly. He writes, fate, or whatever it is, delights to produce a great capacity and then frustrate it. Beethoven went deaf. By our standards, a mean joke. The monkey trick of a spiteful imbecile.
He is asking the darkest question a believer can ask. What reason do we have, except our own desperate, childish wishes, to believe that God is, by any standard we can conceive, good?
He actually wonders if God is an eternal vivisector.
And a vivisector.
A vivisector is someone who performs surgical operations on live, conscious animals for the sake of experimentation.
It is an utterly grotesque, horrifying image of the divine.
It is. He even suggests that all his prayers for his wife during her illness, all the false hopes, the temporary remissions, the miraculous recoveries that seem to happen only to violently reverse.
Yeah, the ups and downs.
He said they felt like they were being deliberately led up the garden path.
He wonders if time after time, when God seemed most gracious, he was really just preparing them for the next, more exquisite torture.
But then there's this incredible moment of self-correction. He steps back from that precipice.
He catches himself.
He reads over what he just wrote and says, I wrote that last night. It was a yell rather than a thought.
That's a profound realization.
He realizes that viewing God as a cosmic sadist is actually way too anthropomorphic.
Yes. It's projecting the absolute worst human traits onto the divine. Vanity, vindictiveness, petty cruelty.
He reasons that picturing God as a bad man who likes setting traps is ridiculous because a being like that couldn't invent love, or laughter, or daffodils, or a frosty sunset.
A spiteful imbecile couldn't make a joke.
Or invent the warmth of a friend. The beauty of the world contradicts the idea of a purely sadistic creator.
So the cosmic sadist theory falls apart.
Right. But what replaces it is equally terrifying in a very different way.
It is the concept of God as the great iconoclast.
The great iconoclast. Break that down.
An iconoclast is literally a breaker of icons, a destroyer of idols. The theological roots of this go deep into the evangelical tradition, drawing heavily on Exodus 32 with the golden calf and Romans 1.
Where Paul talks about worshiping the creature rather than the creator.
Exactly. John Calvin famously said that the human heart is a perpetual forge of idols. And one of the most pervasive, subtle idols we construct is a manageable God image.
Okay, let's bring that down to earth for you listening.
Yeah.
A manageable God image. Like when we subconsciously treat God like a cosmic 401k plan or a vending machine.
Oh, that's exactly what we do.
We put in our prayers, we go to church, we tithe, we try to be nice to our neighbors, and we expect a highly predictable output of blessing, health, and safety.
We want a God who is safe, predictable, and fundamentally exists to underwrite our comfort. But Lewis realizes that the God of the universe is not a vending machine. He is a surgeon. He calls God the eternal vet.
That's another really powerful analogy. If you have a pet that you love and it needs a life-saving surgery, the dog or cat has absolutely no capacity to understand why you are letting a stranger in a white coat cut into their flesh.
They just feel the pain and the betrayal.
The cat will growl and spit and bite the vet. But the vet's intentions are completely good, meaning he won't stop cutting until the infection is completely gone, no matter how much the animal begs him to stop.
What's fascinating here is Lewis's realization about this painful process. He writes, "My idea of God is not a divine idea. It has to be shattered time after time. He shatters it himself. He is the great iconoclast."
So our idea of God has to be broken.
If our God is one who would never allow us to suffer, that God is a cultural idol. It is a fiction. It is not the sovereign God of the cross. Grief, in its terrifying power, is the hammer God uses to destroy that idol.
He writes, could we not almost say that this shattering is one of the marks of his presence? That is such a profound, paradigm-shifting thought.
It really is.
The very thing that feels like abandonment, the complete shattering of our comfortable theology, is actually the definitive proof that the real God is in the room.
And this is where we find the profound daily application for the believer. Everyday spiritual growth requires the shattering of our comfortable assumptions.
It's not optional.
No. True faith is moving constantly from a projection of God, the God we want, to the revelation of God, the God who actually is.
Suffering rarely produces outright intellectual atheism in a mature believer, does it?
No, instead it initially distorts one's doctrine of God. We are tempted to reconstruct God in the image of our pain.
But God, in his mercy, shatters that image too.
We need Christ, not something that merely resembles him.
Lewis makes this amazing comparison to taking communion to illustrate this point. He says, tomorrow morning, a priest will give him a little round, thin, cold, tasteless wafer.
Right.
Is it a disadvantage that this wafer can't pretend the least resemblance to the historical breathing Jesus of Nazareth? No, because he needs Christ, not a picture of him. He says, not my idea of God, but God.
But this shattering process doesn't just apply to our theology. The great iconoclast breaks all our idols.
Which brings us to the next point.
And that leads Lewis to a necessary, incredibly painful realization about how we treat the memories of the people we love, because God isn't the only one we make false, manageable images of.
Yes. Let's dig into this, because this is where the journal takes a turn into the deep psychology of bereavement and the inseparability of love and grief.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
Lewis realizes he is applying the exact same idol-making process to the memory of his wife. He notices that his internal memory of H is slowly becoming a puppet.
He is ruthlessly observant of his own mind. He can feel the insidious beginning of a process that will eventually make the H he thinks of into a more and more imaginary woman.
It's scary when you feel that happening.
He says the little flakes of his own impressions and selections are settling down on the image of her, slowly hiding her real, rugged shape.
He describes her so vividly. He says her mind was lithe and quick and muscular as a leopard.
A great description.
She would knock you over before you knew what was happening if you talked nonsense.
Yeah.
She was fierce. But he realizes the image in his mind is becoming something he can control.
Right, a puppet.
It will smile when he wants comfort or frown when he wants to feel guilty, just as his own internal mood demands. He says that falling in love with this sanitized memory of her would be a sort of incest.
He doesn't want a puppet. He wants her with all her resistances, all her faults, all her unexpectedness, the rough, sharp, cleansing tang of her otherness.
This is where Lewis bridges the reality of human love to the reality of divine love.
Drawing on the epistle of 1 John chapter 4, which famously declares God is love, and the profound promises in Romans 8, we see that biblical love is never merely sentimental.
Right. It is robust, self-giving, and inherently costly.
You mentioned 1 John 4. How does the original language frame that?
Well, wait, you're the expert. I'm supposed to ask you that.
Right. In the Greek, the phrase is ho theos agape estin.
Ho theos agape estin, okay.
It uses what grammarians call a predicate nominative to emphasize that love is not just something God does. It is God's very essence. It is who he is.
It's his nature.
But this presents a terrifying paradox for the grieving person. If God is love, and God designed human love, why does love produce such agonizing pain when it's severed?
That is the ultimate question for anyone who has ever lost someone. And Lewis comes to a breathtaking, incredibly stark conclusion. He writes, the pain I feel now is the happiness I had before. That's the deal.
That's the deal. It strips away all the romanticized poetry we usually wrap around grief.
It really does.
Bereavement is not the truncation of married love. It is not an unnatural interruption of it. It is a regular, inevitable phase of it, just like the honeymoon phase.
Grief does not negate love. It confirms the depth of relational attachment. To love deeply in a fallen, mortal world is to guarantee eventual grief. You cannot have one without the other.
Lewis uses another visceral, almost violent analogy here, the analogy of an amputation.
Yes, this one stuck with me.
He says getting over grief is an ambiguous concept. If a patient has an operation for appendicitis, they heal, they get over it, and they are back to normal. They don't miss their appendix.
Obviously not.
But if a man has his leg off, it is quite another thing altogether. The stump heals, yes. The fierce, continuous, blinding pain stops. He can eventually stump about on a wooden leg.
Right.
In one sense, he has got over it. But he will always, for the rest of his life, be a one-legged man. His whole way of life is permanently changed. Bathing, dressing, getting up out of a chair, everything is different.
That analogy perfectly captures how profound grief permanently alters the landscape of a human life. The amputation is permanent. You don't grow a new leg.
And yet the love remains. The phantom pain in the missing limb is the echo of the love. It testifies to the reality and the immense value of the relationship that was there.
But Lewis also talks about the maddening frustration of this ongoing love. He says, I keep on through habit fitting an arrow to the string, then I remember and have to lay the bow down.
The target is gone.
All his thoughts, his feelings, his impulses to share a joke or an observation had H for their target. Now the target is simply gone. So many roads in his mind once led directly to her, and now they're all dead ends.
It's exhausting.
So let me ask you, if this is the reality of love, that it inevitably ends in this kind of permanent amputation, how can you, the listener, apply this understanding to love Christ or others more fully? Doesn't this just make us want to build giant walls around our hearts? Should we be afraid to love?
That is the most natural human defense mechanism in the world, isn't it? To protect ourselves from future pain by loving less today. To hedge our bets.
Yeah, don't get too close.
But the biblical framework provides a definitive counter to this fear. We shouldn't fear love because the ultimate reality of the universe isn't loss, it is resurrection.
Resurrection.
In Romans 8, verses 38 and 39, Paul promises that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus.
Will be able to separate us.
The Greek verb used there for will be able is dynasetai. It's a future middle tense, functioning as a definitive absolute negation.
Dynasetai, meaning it's impossible.
Nothing will ever have the power to sever that love. So, while earthly love absolutely involved the agonizing pain of temporary separation, it is ultimately held within a divine love that cannot be amputated.
Which leads us out of the darkest part of the journal and into the final phase of Lewis's journey. Reorientation, surrender, and resurrection hope.
Then we should clarify, right?
Yeah, it's important to note that Lewis doesn't end the book in the depths of despair, but he also doesn't end it with a neat, happy bow. The house of cards is not magically rebuilt.
No, the shift he experiences is incredibly subtle. He describes it not as an emotional high or some mystical vision where the heavens part, but as an unobtrusive but massive sense that H is still a reality to be taken into account.
He calls it a chuckle in the darkness.
Such a great phrase.
I absolutely love that imagery. He imagines a man locked in total darkness, terrified, thinking he's in a dungeon. Then he hears a sound, maybe the faint sound of waves or wind, proving he's actually in the open air. Or maybe a small chuckle right beside him in the blackness, proving he has a friend in the dark.
Either way, it's a good sound.
It is. And he realizes that his frantic grasping earlier was the very thing blocking him from hearing this comfort.
Exactly. He returns to the earlier idea of the bolted door. He asks himself, was it my own frantic need that slammed it in my face? God couldn't give him comfort when his soul was nothing but a maniacal, deafening cry for help.
You can't hear a chuckle over your own screaming.
Sometimes, the first profound act of grace is not a change in our circumstance, but the surrender of our self-protective control. We have to stop grabbing at God so we can actually open our hands to receive from him.
And receiving this comfort requires a massive paradigm shift in how we view the dead and the resurrection. Lewis says that the dead are like pure intelligences.
Pure intelligences? What does he mean?
He had an impression of his wife's mind momentarily facing his own. It wasn't a spooky ghost story. It was unemotional, brisk, cheerful, alert, firm. There is no nonsense about the dead, he writes.
This completely challenges our sentimental cultural views of heaven. We usually want the happy past restored exactly as it was.
We want the old house back.
We want, as Lewis jokes elsewhere, cigars in heaven. We want our old living room back, just in the clouds. But reality never repeats. The exact same thing is never taken away and given back identically.
And this is where the theology of 1 Corinthians 15 and John 11 anchors us.
Right. In John 11, Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life.
Yes. Notice he doesn't just say, there will be a resurrection one day in the future. He says, I am the resurrection.
He uses the present tense.
Resurrection is not just an event. It is embodied in the person of Christ himself. And in 1 Corinthians 15.20, Paul writes, but in fact, Christ has been raised from the dead.
The Greek verb there is igitai, which is in the perfect tense. This indicates an abiding result state. Christ remains risen. It's a state of aspect.
Okay, translating that for you listening. It means the resurrection isn't just a historical event that happened 2,000 years ago and we're just waiting around for the sequel.
No, it's not.
It is a current, abiding reality that changes the molecular structure of our hope today.
Exactly. So the resurrection hope must move from being a cognitive doctrine, just another card in our house of cards, to a lived, breathing trust. We grieve, but as Paul says, we do not grieve as those without hope.
And this changes how we view the fading of our memories, which Lewis was so terrified of earlier.
That is a profoundly important pastoral point. The fading of memory often feels like a second death to the grieving person.
It does. You panic when you realize you can't exactly remember the sound of their laugh.
But our loved ones in Christ are not merely memories to be preserved in the past, like flies in amber. They are living souls in the future, currently in the presence of the King.
We don't have to look backward to a fading, static photograph. We look forward to the resurrection.
Lewis even pushes back against the well-meaning people who say she is at peace, as if death automatically cures all human complexity.
Right. He says H was a splendid thing, a sword, but she was also a sinful woman married to a sinful man. Two of God's patients, not yet cured.
He knows there are stains to be scoured away in the presence of God.
That the sword will be made even brighter and sharper in the maker's hands. He entrusts her entirely to the smith, the gardener.
And entrusting her to God requires the ultimate surrender. It is the final dismantling of his idols. He asks God a terrifying question.
What's the question?
Are the real terms of this arrangement that he can only meet H again if he learns to love God so much that he genuinely doesn't care whether he meets her or not?
Oh, wow. That's intense.
It's the ultimate test. Is God the end, the ultimate goal? Or is God merely a means to get our loved ones back?
He writes, "Lord, are these your real terms?" And he gets no verbal answer. But crucially, he also doesn't get a bolted door anymore.
The door isn't bolted.
He says the response was more like a silent, certainly not uncompassionate gaze, as though he shook his head, not in refusal, but waving the question. Like, peace, child, you don't understand.
Because we are asking nonsense questions. We are trying to figure out the complex mechanics of eternity with a primate's brain.
Yeah, our brains just can't handle it.
As Lewis concludes, heaven will solve our problems, but not by showing us incredibly subtle reconciliations between all our contradictory human notions.
What will happen then?
The notions themselves will all be knocked from under our feet. We shall see that there never was any problem.
So to tie this massive, heavy, beautiful journey to our daily lives, and specifically your daily life listening right now, Lewis says we are promised sufferings. It's not an accident, it's part of the program.
The program.
How does embracing this brutal reality actually free a Christian to live more fully today?
It frees us from the exhausting, crushing burden of pretending. A grief observed teaches us that authentic faith isn't the absence of turmoil. It is the perseverance of trust directly through the turmoil.
You don't have to hide it.
Embracing this truth frees you to bring your raw, unfiltered, messy grief directly to God. You don't have to sanitize your prayers. You don't have to fake peace when your heart is broken.
You can lament.
You can lament, you can protest, you can scream why, knowing with absolute certainty that God is not intimidated by your pain. Furthermore, it frees you to love deeply.
Because you're not afraid of the cost.
You know that grief is the cost of love. But you also know that love is eternal, while grief is temporary. It allows your trials to refine your theology, stripping away the cultural idols, the cosmic 401k plans, and leaving you with the rugged, reliable, unshakable truth of the cross.
Let's synthesize all of this. We've journeyed from the physical, bodily shock of grief and the complete collapse of the intellectual house of cards.
Through the agonizing, bolted door of God's silence.
We've watched a brilliant man wrestle with the terrifying idea of a cosmic sadist, only to realize God is actually the great iconoclast.
Shattering our false idols out of a severe mercy.
We've seen that grief is just a necessary phase of love, like an amputation we must learn to walk with. And finally, we've arrived at a reoriented hope.
Anchored not in our fading memories, but in the living, resurrected Christ.
And through it all, it's crucial to realize that Lewis never loses his faith. He loses his illusions.
The faith that survives this journal is tested, forged in absolute fire. It's a faith that understands God is both the surgeon who must cut to heal and the Father who weeps with us in the waiting room.
To you listening right now, here is your call to action today. Do not redefine God based on your pain. Bring your pain directly to the God revealed in Scripture.
That's right.
Treat your grief as the natural, honorable cost of loving deeply in a fallen world. Let God shatter your manageable image of Him so you can know Him as He truly is. And most importantly, anchor your hope not in the past, but in the promised resurrection.
Well said. This book is a severe mercy, showing us that when the house of cards falls, the rock underneath remains.
It really does. And I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over today. Near the end of his journal, Lewis wonders if the dead look back at us, seeing us more clearly than they ever did before.
Oh, this part is beautiful.
He asks, does H now see exactly how much froth or tinsel there was in what she called and I call my love? So be it. Look your hardest, dear. We didn't idealize each other.
The froth and the tinsel.
If the ultimate perfection of our love is only found by passing through the fire of loss, by aggressively stripping away the froth and the tinsel, how might you look at the people you love today?
Will you hold them tightly?
Will you hold them tightly as precious gifts, while holding on to the true, unbroken image of God even tighter? Because remember, we started this deep dive talking about blueprints and foundations.
Yielding a house.
We try to build these solid, perfect, insulated houses of theology and life, utterly terrified of the earthquake. But maybe the earthquake isn't the end of the story.
What if it's the beginning?
Maybe the earthquake is exactly what clears the ground, shattering the illusion, so you can finally see that you were never meant to live in a house you built yourself. You were always meant to live in the unshakable reality of God.